I'd like to call the the meeting into order. It's 9 o'clock and we got quite a bit on the agenda. I'd like to have approval of today's agenda, if I could, a motion.
I move to approve the agenda.
All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Those that oppose, same sign. Approval of the minutes.
I move approval of the minutes.
Seconded.
All in favor, same sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So approved. On July 10th, 2019 minutes were approved, so we're moving to new business. Seeing that we have none, or do we? Okay, we'll move into the old business, civil service ruling, and the regulations update.
Yeah, hopefully next month we will have all of you here with us either in person or by phone and can vote on those. So that's what we're waiting on. We just have to have everyone present for you to be able to vote.
Are you going to send them out ahead of time in the revised form?
Yeah, I have those prepared, so I can send those along with the minutes from this meeting.
Next on the agenda is John Kiss's appeal hearing, deliberation, and ruling. Last time we ended just before our deliberation, so that's where we're at today. But I would like to start by saying that we're deliberating here in front of you, but because of the time length that we didn't expect, I think there was a little bit of a rush on behalf of maybe the presenting attorney or on our city's attorney's part. So I'll give you 2 minutes each if you would like to just reiterate a closing statement.
Mr. Kiss was terminated by Supervisor Todd Jones based on not reporting a motor vehicle accident, his second offense of that. His disciplinary record is in the specification of charges. There's a verbal, there's a written, there's a 5-day, and there's a 10-day for not reporting a prior accident. The City of Davenport terminated Mr. Kiss based on failure to report this most recent accident. It's the Commission's determination to decide whether that is to be affirmed or modified or reversed. City would just ask the Commission to consider, you can't put yourselves into the shoes of Todd Jones and say, what would I have done? The question you've got to ask yourselves is what Todd Jones did reasonable based on the information you've received, and we ask that you uphold the termination on the grounds that we presented during the hearing. Thanks.
Name for it. Kissinger? Yes.
Thank you, Commissioners. I appreciate your time last time around and this time as well. Just a few. Yes, sorry. I'm sorry. How's that? Okay. Thank you again for your time. Just a few points that I wanted to reiterate from last time when we were here. John Kiss, first of all, I think we have to take into consideration the circumstances at the time that this incident supposedly took place. He had been working a significant amount of time during the flooding, and these were unusual hours for him. Multiple hours, multiple days in a row, not a lot of time off. He was not aware that he hit anything, and there are no witnesses who can substantiate that he did. So first of all, we don't have any specific evidence, or solid evidence, that he actually did get into an accident. If he did, he wasn't aware of it, and when he came back to bring the vehicle back, there was some repairs that needed to be made to the hose, and it was a situation where, again, that truck needed to get out and needed to be in action to address the issues that were occurring because of the flooding. So the circumstances when he brought the truck back were also different for him. They were rushed, and he didn't see any damage. And I think that is consistent with other people who also looked at that truck afterwards. We had another individual from the shop who the two of them were working behind the truck, working on that hose, taking it off, replacing it. That other individual from the shop never said anything, didn't apparently see any damage to the truck, and if he did, he certainly didn't say anything about it. The truck then is returned to its parking spot for the next individual to take it out. Mr. Bloomingdale, he comes, he does a walk around, and he doesn't see any damage. It's consistent with Mr. Kiss's actions as well. He didn't see any damage when he returned the truck. And that was the reason why he didn't report anything. One, he wasn't aware that he had hit anything. And two, he never saw any damage. And neither did Mr. Bloomingdale until later in the day. So I think that the evidence here certainly substantiates that if Mr. Kiss was in an accident, he wasn't aware of it, and he wasn't aware that there was any damage. And so his failure to report anything was not intentional. It was because he wasn't aware that anything had happened, and he didn't see any damage. And those are circumstances which do not deserve termination. There's no dispute here that he does have things in his record that aren't favorable to him. We're not trying to hide that. He's not trying to hide that. But the issue here is about this particular incident and this alleged accident. And he wasn't aware that anything happened and wasn't aware there was damage, so he couldn't report anything. He didn't report anything because he didn't know anything had happened. And that's not a basis for termination. That's a basis for do better next time. But he deserves another chance based on all the facts here. And so we would ask that the commission reverse his termination in order that he be reinstated. Thank you.
I guess if you don't mind, I'll exercise my right to offer the final remarks.
Yes.
What Ms. Harsley said is true. There is no direct evidence that Mr. Kiss had an accident on the day that this occurred, April 16th, if I recall correctly. But what we did hear was that the person he was working with, sitting in a truck several feet away, heard the collision and saw Mr. Kiss get out of his truck and walk behind it. As far as Mr. Bloomingdale's testimony, they didn't notice the damage on their initial inspection of the day, but when they got to their first stop of the day, they noticed it and immediately went back to the garage to have it fixed. So there was no other evidence that was presented to this commission that this damage occurred in some other fashion. The only evidence that this commission heard was the evidence through the co-worker of Mr. Kiss on the 16th who heard the collision and saw him get out of the truck. Nobody else testified to this damage happening in any other regard. And when Mr. Kiss was questioned about it by Todd Jones and Christina Montanaro Murphy, he repeatedly changed his story. And why would he repeatedly change his story? I don't know. That's for you to weigh. But the city believes that we proved that by circumstantial evidence that John Kiss had this accident and should have been aware that he had it, given that his co-worker was aware of it. Thank you.
Commissioner Cathy.
I have a couple questions. Before the end of the hearing, we asked for additional photographs, and I noticed that there are a couple photographs up here that have not been entered into evidence, and I don't know what they are.
These photographs that we have here, I thought, were the evidence of the rear of the truck. Am I correct?
Commissioner Guest asked for general pictures of the type of truck that Mr. Kiss was operating. These are actual general pictures of that truck, not showing any damage, just to show you what the truck looks like in general.
Okay.
I'm not offering them as evidence. You just wanted them as clarification. So I don't know if Jill has any comments she wants to make to that.
I actually didn't receive copies of the photographs, so.
They came from HR, so
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry.
Okay. No, that's okay.
You want to see them? They're just general pictures
If
of
they're just photos without any damage, I don't have any concerns about that.
Are there any other questions from the commission?
I would just reiterate then, these photos are not photos of the truck that was in the accident.
There are photos of the truck that was in the accident, but they're just general photos because Commissioner Guest wanted to see what the truck looked like.
Okay,
in
but
general.
they're not intending to depict the
Damage
damage?
or anything else, correct?
Okay.
Were we able to get clear photos? We had asked for that as well, of the damages that were done. Were we able to get clear photos of that?
I have better pictures at this point in time. I did not have them. I don't know if Jill wants to address whether she has any objection to you having those at this point in time or not.
The commission, I think, is entitled to ask for whatever it chooses. The only photos that I've seen, other than the ones that you have this morning, are the black and white ones. So I haven't seen any color photos or clearer photos of the damage, but I don't have an objection to you looking at that. Again, our position is that he wasn't aware that it happened, and therefore that's why he didn't report it, not that there wasn't some damage at some point done.
I would like to see clear photos of the ones that were presented.
I can go print them out. If you want to give me 5 minutes, I'll be right back.
We'll take a 5-minute recess.
Would you like to move on to the certification of list?
Sure.
Okay.
We have the forestry tech.
All right. Yep. So as you mentioned, we have the forestry technician position. It's the written exam was worth 100%. So we took that. If you pass the written exam, then you get put on the list as long as you pass the background investigation. So there are your stats, and then it is also part of the Teamster Union. Just wanted to point that out. We do have minimum qualifications for the forestry technician. None of these have changed. That's why we hadn't brought them to you beforehand. So they're all the same qualifications that were previously done. And then for this process, we had 27 applicants. We had one applicant complete more than one application for the same position. 21 didn't meet the minimum qualifications. 5 candidates were qualified and invited to test. One had contacted me ahead of time of the testing and let me know that he had decided to withdraw from the process, and then 2 had actually failed the written exam. The 2 additional people had passed the written exam, then were sent to the background investigation process, and they had passed the background investigation, and that's why we have 2 on the certification list. Okay. All right.
Question? No. Pat?
Sure.
I'm sorry, I must have missed, what were the qualifications?
Sure. Yeah. So just to name a few, they do have to complete the course in forestry or a closely related subject and 2 years of increasing responsible experience in tree nursery or forestry orientation or an equivalent of that type. It also requires possession of a valid Iowa commercial driver's license. They must pass a physical examination, must be able to acquire a valid Iowa commercial pesticide applicator license, and that's once they're hired. So they must be able to require that, and then obviously become an Iowa resident within 2 years of being hired.
Thank you.
No problem. Any additional questions for this one?
No.
Okay. We'll move on to signal technician. This is one that I've brought to you before, and unfortunately with this position, it is very specific to the qualifications and it's in very high demand. So we have had to bring this one back again because the previous people that were on the list were offered the position and had declined it because they had already gotten jobs by the time the list was certified, which is pretty understandable given that electricians are in very high need at this point in time. So with the signal technician, it's an entry-level position within the Streets and Light Division of Public Works. We have a 2-part here, so the written exam worth 30%, the interview worth 70%. Again, all qualifying candidates were sent to background investigation, and we have a list here today that's ready for certification, which I'm happy to announce that we have quite a few good candidates on there, so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get someone on our team. Again, just to highlight some of the minimum qualifications here, you do have to have post high school training in electrical work, at least 2 years experience working in the electrical field or a combination of the two, a valid Iowa commercial driver's license. There are some qualifications that must be obtained within the first 2 years of employment, but we really do due diligence in working with that employee to get those qualifications to make sure that they are successful in this position. And then again, they must become an Iowa resident within 2 years of being hired. So for the signal technician, we had 24 applicants, one who was simply not willing to relocate, so that would disqualify them. 12 did not meet the minimum qualifications. 11 were invited to take the written test. 1 failed the written exam, and then 7 did not show. 3 passed the written exam, the interview, and the background investigation, and we have 3 on the certification list today.
Any questions? Thank you. Move to next.
I'm going to pass it off here to Captain Imming. Oh, okay. All right. Sorry, I apologize. Scott had told me that Captain Imming would be speaking, but I can definitely speak for him. So the Community Services Specialist, it's an entry-level position in the Traffic Safety Unit of the Patrol Division. It is a 2-part, so there was a written exam and an interview component. All qualifying candidates were sent a personal history statement for the background check, and then we have the list that's ready for certification today. This is an AFSCME position, so just to make sure that you're aware of that. With this position, the minimum qualifications are that they must have a high school diploma, possess a valid driver's license, they must obtain the various certifications there, and I have to be honest, I might ask Captain Imming to speak on those should you have further questions on any of those. And then again, they must become an Iowa resident within the 2 years of hire. So for this process, there were 120 applicants. 9 completed more than 1 application for the same position. 17 didn't meet the minimum qualifications, so then that leaves us with 94 candidates who were actually qualified and invited to take the written exam. 2 had withdrawn from that process, 10 did not show, 32 did not schedule, so we give them a certain amount of time to schedule for the exam, and if they choose not to schedule the exam, then that is a disqualification to move forward, and then we did have 16 of those people fail. So overall, 34 passed the written exam and were invited to the interview. 4 did decide to withdraw from the process at that point, 2 did not show, and then 10 failed the interview process. We have 18 candidates that went through the background investigation. 13 of those candidates passed the background. 4 did not turn in the required paperwork, which would disqualify them from that background process. And then at that point, we actually did have 1 withdraw. So today we have 13 candidates on the certification list for approval. And I'll go back. Are there any questions on this specific process?
Kathy? Yeah. Go ahead.
What was the nature of the written exam?
Yeah.
Jane Emming, Davenport Police Department. The written exam was comprised of 4 different sections. The first section was reading comprehension. Second section was math. Third section was vocabulary. And the fourth section was writing skills to ensure that they had those competencies to be able to perform the position. So it was 40 total questions.
Question? Kathy or Pat?
What does the community service specialist actually do?
Most of the duties for the community service specialists involve running the automated traffic enforcement. So the speed van that you might see around the community, they operate that van and operate the equipment inside the van that generates the automated traffic enforcement citations. The second duty that they perform for the city of Davenport, they tow. They cite abandoned vehicles that are reported by our community, put the notice on the vehicles, they come back and they coordinate the tow of that vehicle and then write the report for that vehicle. So those are the 2 main duties that they perform.
Any other questions? Thank you.
You're welcome.
we'll take and wait and sign those, and we'll move back into the deliberation at this time. Kathy.
Karen,
Karen.
where are the other exhibits? Where are the other exhibits?
From before?
Uh-huh.
Are they not in our book? Look like they were removed.
Are they in this file?
No, everyone had one.
Mine are in the file.
Yeah.
Whatever I have is there.
Is it potent that you have one of those today?
I would like to see the diagram again of where the two vehicles.
If you could turn on your mic.
I would like to see the diagram again of where the two vehicles were located.
Would either one of you have a copy of that we could just, yeah. Could we use that as, yeah. Thank you. And this is Exhibit 1. Are there any other concerns or questions in regards to the evidence and the Latrice?
What is this a picture of that we have here? Does everybody else know? And I don't.
This is this is a picture of the actual post or pole that was lined up with the vehicle to show that it was struck at that point.
So is this the bumper of the vehicle on this side of the picture? Is this the bumper? Yes, that's the bumper. And then this is the post? Okay.
With the evidence that has been presented, I think it's up to this commission to determine the case that's presented before us, which is whether or not Mr. Kiss is liable for creating an accident and not reporting it, and then determination and evidence after that accident. Is there any questions on that? So then what we're looking for is either a motion to affirm, modify, or reverse from this council.
I have a question. Having not been through this process before, I don't understand what deliberation is supposed to entail in these the protocols.
Deliberation at this point is to either discuss as a whole, or to ask further questions in regards to evidence that has been presented so that we can draw a conclusion to the matter.
You've been presented an appeal hearing by an employee who faced disciplinary action, in this case, a termination. Your role in that process is to listen to the evidence that was presented to you, to deliberate that evidence, consider that evidence, and determine whether the termination is justified or unjustified.
Do with what deliberation means. Are we supposed to independently make our own decision based on what we heard, or are we allowed to talk about it?
You're allowed to talk about it. What Chairperson Mr. Kelly is looking for at the end of your conversation is a motion to do one of those three things. But
I
yes,
understand that
you're allowed
part.
to talk about it just like jurors in a courtroom.
Thank you.
Lori, thank you. At this time, we'll ask that if, after our deliberation has ended, we would take and call for a motion to modify, affirm, or reverse by one of the commissioners.
This is interesting, I'll tell you. After deliberation, I move that we reverse the decision to fire Mr. Kiss.
I second.
Seeing that we have on the floor a motion to reverse the decision of the termination of Mr. Kiss, I'm going to call for a vote by roll, starting with Commissioner Michael.
Aye.
Commissioner Karen.
Yes.
You know, this is a hard decision. Commissioner Samora.
Abstain.
I think a lot of times people wonder why, when you look at this commission and you look at those people that are here, and we asked some of the questions that we asked, is because in most cases, even when we're looking at a lot of the things that we consider, it's easy to try to bring people in, but it's really difficult when we have situations like this, and we rely upon those individuals that are in place to handle those situations that take place before they come before us, such as the unions and the supervisors and those people that are in charge. But without further ado, my vote is yes. So at this time, we're reversing the decision of termination of Mr. Kiss. Any other questions? Well, that closes the deliberation and also the case. We'll move on to adjourn. Oh, excuse me, we have to sign the certification list?
Also, Chairman Kelly,
Yes.
before you leave today, you will need to do an order reversing
Yep.
the decision. So you'll need to see Kari to get that done so you can sign off on it and we
Sure.
can get that out. Thank you.
I move that we approve the certification list.
I second.
All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. So moved.
If you'd like to go ahead and adjourn, you can sign after.
Motion to adjourn at, looks like 9:40.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor, sign of aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thank you.